It was just another Saturday afternoon at the local grocery store. I was cruising down the aisles, focused on my shopping list, when I bumped into Adam. He seemed to come out of nowhere, his cart nearly colliding with mine. "Oh, sorry about that," he said with a friendly smile. "No problem," I replied, slightly taken aback by his sudden presence. We started chatting as we navigated through the produce section. Adam was easy to talk to, asking about my plans for the weekend and sharing his own stories. He was charming, with a warm laugh that made the conversation feel effortless. I couldn't help but notice how quickly he was opening up to me, sharing personal anecdotes and asking questions about my life. It was flattering, but a small part of me felt wary. I wasn't used to meeting people who were so forward. As we moved to the dairy section, he offered to help me reach for a carton of milk on a high shelf. His gesture felt genuine, and I appreciated the help. Adam seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, and his curiosity was apparent in the way he asked about my interests and plans. Before we parted ways, he asked if I'd like to keep in touch. "I'd really like to continue our conversation," he said. I hesitated for a moment, but then agreed, exchanging contact information. There was a mix of curiosity and caution in me, curious to see where this might lead, but cautious about his sudden friendliness. As I finished my shopping and headed to the checkout, I couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was more than just a casual meeting. It left me with a strange mix of excitement and apprehension, wondering what would come next. Back at my apartment, I was settling in for a quiet evening when my phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Adam. His text was friendly and casual, asking how my day had been. I was a little surprised but pleased. After all, he was someone I had just met. I responded with a brief update on my day, and that seemed to open the floodgates. Over the next few days, Adam's texts became more frequent. He would ask about my plans, my interests, and how things were going with my studies. At first, I was flattered by the attention. It was nice to have someone checking in on me, especially when things were feeling a bit routine. However, as the days passed, the messages started to feel overwhelming. What began as occasional check-ins turned into a steady stream of texts. Adam's questions became more personal, and he started asking for small favors, like recommendations for places to eat or advice on what to do in my spare time. I found myself struggling to keep up with the constant stream of messages. I tried to balance my responses, keeping the conversation polite but distant. I'd answer his questions and offer a bit of small talk, but I made sure not to delve too deeply into personal matters. I wanted to remain friendly without encouraging the sense of intimacy that Adam seemed to be pushing for. As the messages continued to pile up, I couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. What had started as a pleasant exchange was turning into something that felt increasingly invasive. I hoped that by keeping my responses measured and detached, I could navigate this situation without causing a confrontation. I was at work, taking my usual break and scrolling through my phone, when another message from Adam popped up. This time, the tone was different. Instead of casual conversation, he was asking if I could lend him some money. At first, I was stunned. Adam explained that he had some unexpected expenses. His car broke down, and he needed funds to cover the repair costs. He seemed genuinely distressed, and I could hear the urgency in his messages. He even went into detail about the repairs and how his budget was tight this month. I felt a wave of discomfort wash over me. I didn't know Adam well enough to be giving him money, but his persistence and the elaborate nature of his story made it difficult to ignore. I was torn between my instinct to help someone in need and the nagging feeling that this might be a red flag. His messages continued, each one painting a more desperate picture. He mentioned that he didn't want to ask his friends or family because he didn't want to burden them. It all sounded very convincing, but a part of me remained skeptical. Was this a genuine request or just another way to get close to me? After several days of back-and-forth messages, I decided to give him a small amount of money. I hoped it would be a one-time request and that this would settle the matter. I transferred the money, feeling a mix of relief and anxiety. I wanted to believe that I was doing the right thing, but I couldn't shake the nagging worry that I was being manipulated. When I told my friend about the situation later, she suggested I be cautious and set boundaries. Her advice made me realize I needed to be more vigilant. I hoped that this would be the end of his requests and that things would return to a more comfortable level of interaction. As I went back to work, I couldn't help but feel a lingering sense of unease. I had hoped that helping Adam would ease the situation, but instead, it had left me questioning what would come next. It was a chilly Saturday morning when I met Adam at a local cafe for coffee. We'd agreed to catch up, and I was looking forward to a casual chat. Adam was already seated when I arrived, and he greeted me with his usual warm smile. As we settled into our seats and sipped our coffee, the conversation started off light. But then, out of nowhere, Adam brought up a new topic. "You know," he began, "I've been thinking about how convenient it would be if I were closer to you." I raised an eyebrow, intrigued but wary. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. Adam leaned in slightly, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "Well, I found a great apartment nearby, and I thought it might be a good idea for me to move in there. It could make things easier for both of us, more convenient to hang out, and I could help you with stuff around your place." My heart skipped a beat. The idea was so sudden and unexpected that I wasn't sure how to process it. I felt a knot of unease forming in my stomach. It seemed too fast, too soon. "I appreciate the thought, but I'm not sure this is a good idea," I said cautiously. "I really think it's better if we keep things as they are for now," I said firmly, trying to mask my discomfort. "I'm not ready for that kind of arrangement." Adam's face fell slightly, but he quickly masked his disappointment with a forced smile. "I understand," he said, though I could sense the frustration in his voice. "I just thought it would be a good opportunity for us." As we finished our coffee, I couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that lingered. His proposal had felt like a step too far, and I was relieved to be going back to my own space. I hoped that by declining his offer, I could maintain the boundaries I needed. As I left the cafe, I felt a mix of relief and anxiety. I was glad I'd stood my ground, but I couldn't help but wonder if this was just the beginning of more complicated interactions with Adam. I was settling in for a quiet evening at home when my phone buzzed with a new message from Adam. It seemed he hadn't taken my earlier refusal seriously. His message was filled with reassurances and questions about why I was hesitant to let him move closer. He insisted that it was a great opportunity for both of us, and seemed genuinely puzzled by my reluctance. I sighed, feeling a growing sense of frustration. It wasn't just the persistence, it was the way he was making me feel as if I was overreacting to a perfectly reasonable suggestion. It was becoming increasingly clear that he was not respecting my boundaries. His messages continued to flood in, each one more insistent than the last. He questioned my reasons for not wanting him as a neighbor, and even suggested that maybe I was misunderstanding his intentions. It felt like he was trying to make me doubt my own feelings. As if that wasn't enough, Adam started calling me more frequently. Each call was a reminder of his pressure tactics. Whenever I answered, he would sound disappointed but not defeated, pushing his case for why his proposal was still a good idea. I found myself feeling trapped between wanting to be polite and the growing urge to cut off all contact. One evening, after another relentless call, I felt my patience wearing thin. "Adam," I said firmly when I finally answered his call, "I've already made my decision. I don't think it's a good idea for you to move closer, and I'd appreciate it if you respected my wishes." His response was a mix of surprise and frustration. "I just don't understand why you're being so difficult about this. I thought we had a good connection." "It's not about being difficult," I countered, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's about my comfort and boundaries. I need you to respect that." After that conversation, I made a conscious effort to limit my responses to his messages and calls. I hoped that by being as firm as possible, he would eventually take the hint and back off. But as the days passed, the feeling of being pursued and pressured lingered, leaving me increasingly anxious about what might come next. I wished for a simple resolution to this situation, but the constant follow-ups made it clear that Adam wasn't ready to let go easily. I braced myself for whatever might come next, hoping that my boundaries would eventually be respected. I was at work trying to focus on a particularly demanding project when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Adam's number. I hesitated but answered, hoping it might be a simple conversation. "Hey!" Adam's voice was tense and urgent. "I really need your help again." I frowned, sensing something was off. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. Adam quickly launched into a story about a friend who was in dire straits. "My friend's in trouble," he explained. "She's facing a major crisis, and I need to help her out. I'm short on funds and could really use some support." He went on with emotional details, painting a vivid picture of his friend's predicament. His voice cracked with what sounded like genuine concern, and he described how his friend was on the brink of losing her home and needed immediate assistance. The urgency in his tone was palpable, and it tugged at my heartstrings. However, the more he spoke, the more I felt uneasy. This was becoming a pattern. Each request seemed more desperate and elaborate than the last. I couldn't help but question the authenticity of his story, especially since he had already made multiple requests for money. "I'm really sorry to hear about your friend," I said cautiously. "But I've already helped you before, and I'm not in a position to provide more financial assistance right now." Adam's reaction was immediate and intense. "But you don't understand how critical this is. My friend needs this money urgently. I wouldn't ask if it weren't absolutely necessary." I felt a surge of alarm at his insistence. It was clear that his demands were escalating, and I was no longer comfortable with the direction things were heading. "Adam, I need you to respect my decision. I've already helped you once, and I can't do more right now. Your ongoing requests are making me very uncomfortable." There was a brief silence on the other end before he muttered a frustrated, "Okay," and hung up. I was left feeling shaken and more determined than ever to set firm boundaries. As I tried to refocus on my work, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that Adam's requests were becoming increasingly intrusive. I knew I had to protect my own well-being and finances, even if it meant enduring more tension with him. It had been a long day at work, and I was looking forward to a quiet evening at home when my phone started buzzing incessantly. It was Adam again, with a flurry of messages and missed calls. I felt a knot of frustration tighten in my chest as I glanced at my screen. I hesitated before opening his latest message. This time the request was more urgent and demanding than ever. Adam was asking for a significant amount of money, claiming that his friend's situation had worsened drastically. He painted a dramatic picture of impending disaster, hoping to tug at my heartstrings once again. I read through his messages, feeling a mix of anger and exhaustion. The relentlessness of his demands had crossed a line. Despite his emotional pleas and elaborate stories, I had already made it clear that I couldn't provide more financial support. His refusal to accept my boundaries was wearing me down. After several missed calls and a barrage of desperate texts, I knew I couldn't tolerate this any longer. I needed to take control of the situation and protect myself from his persistent harassment. With a deep breath, I made the decision to block his number. I navigated to the settings on my phone, blocking Adam's contact and silencing his number. As I confirmed the block, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Finally, I was taking a concrete step to end the intrusive and unsettling interactions, but as the relief settled in, it was accompanied by a lingering sense of concern. What if Adam tried to reach me through other means? What if there were repercussions for cutting off contact? The uncertainty made me uneasy, but I knew that setting firm boundaries was necessary for my peace of mind. As I put my phone away, I felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. I was hopeful that this would bring an end to the distressing situation, but I remained vigilant, prepared for any potential fallout. For now, I was focusing on reclaiming my sense of normalcy and moving forward with a renewed sense of control. The evening after blocking Adam was a strange mix of relief and lingering anxiety. I sat on my couch, trying to unwind, but my mind kept racing back to the whole ordeal. The constant buzzing of my phone had finally ceased, but I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. I picked up my phone and reviewed the missed calls and messages from Adam. It was clear that he had been relentless. His last messages were full of desperation, and I felt a pang of guilt as I read through them. Still, I reminded myself that I had done what was necessary to protect my boundaries and well-being. Even with the block in place, a nagging worry remained. Would Adam try to reach me through other channels? Would he find a way to circumvent the block? The thought of him contacting me via email or social media made me anxious. I hoped that blocking his number would be enough, but the uncertainty was unsettling. I decided to reach out to a close friend for advice and support. I called Sarah, who had always been a good listener and offered sound advice. When she answered, I filled her in on everything that had happened: Adam's initial charm, his increasing demands for money, and my decision to block him. Sarah listened intently and offered her perspective. "It sounds like you made the right call," she said soothingly. "It's important to set boundaries, especially when someone is being so persistent. You need to take care of yourself first." She suggested that I remain vigilant and consider reviewing my privacy settings on social media, just in case Adam tried to reach out through other means. Her advice made me feel more prepared to handle any potential fallout. After our conversation, I felt a bit more grounded. It was comforting to have someone else's perspective and support. I made a mental note to check my social media privacy settings and stay alert for any unusual activity. As I settled down for the night, I felt a sense of relief knowing that I had taken steps to protect myself. The situation had been stressful and challenging, but I was hopeful that I could move forward without further complications. For now, I was focusing on finding a sense of normalcy and ensuring that I was prepared for any possible next steps. With the unsettling chapter of Adam behind me, I was determined to regain a sense of normalcy and control over my life. The absence of his constant messages and calls was a huge relief, and I found myself slowly rediscovering the peace and comfort of my routine. Each day felt like a small victory as I went through my usual activities without the shadow of Adam's intrusion. I resumed my regular schedule, diving into work and personal projects with renewed focus. I felt a sense of confidence and ease returning, like I was finally stepping back into my own space after a long, stressful detour. Still, the experience had left me more cautious than before. I knew I couldn't let my guard down completely. I took proactive steps to protect my personal information and prevent any future unwanted attention. I reviewed and updated my privacy settings on social media, ensuring that only trusted contacts could reach me. I also changed some of my passwords and set up additional security measures to safeguard my accounts. To be better prepared for any future encounters with strangers, I developed a few strategies for handling unwanted attention. I made a mental checklist for recognizing and addressing red flags early on. For instance, if someone I barely knew started asking for money or making excessive contact, I would set clear boundaries from the start and be firm about my limits. I also shared my experience with a few close friends and family members, not only for support, but to help them understand how to spot similar situations and offer their own advice. Their reassurance and suggestions helped solidify my approach to handling such scenarios. As the days went by, I found myself feeling more secure and confident. I was back to enjoying my routine, engaging in activities that I loved, and focusing on my goals. While the shadow of Adam's behavior was still a part of my recent past, it no longer dominated my thoughts. I felt prepared for the future, armed with new strategies and a clearer understanding of my own boundaries. Moving forward, I was ready to face any challenges with a renewed sense of resilience and awareness. Today, I found a quiet spot in the park near my apartment, seeking some solitude to reflect on the journey I've been through. The soft rustling of the leaves and the gentle warmth of the sun provided a peaceful backdrop for my thoughts. It was a perfect setting for looking back on everything that had happened with Adam and finding a sense of closure. As I sat on the bench, I replayed the entire experience in my mind, from the initial meeting at the grocery store to the decision to block his number. The ordeal had been draining and challenging, but it had also been a profound learning experience. I realized how crucial it is to set firm boundaries and trust my instincts when dealing with unfamiliar situations. I felt a deep sense of understanding about personal safety and the importance of protecting oneself from undue pressure or intrusion. It had become clear that my initial instincts about Adam were valid, and standing firm in my boundaries had been the right choice. The experience had taught me to be more vigilant and assertive when it came to handling unwanted attention and requests. As I continued to reflect, I considered documenting my experience. It could serve as a cautionary tale for others who might find themselves in similar situations. Sharing what I had learned about recognizing red flags, setting boundaries, and trusting one's gut could potentially help someone else avoid the stress and confusion I had faced. I took out my journal and began writing down the details of my experience, focusing on the lessons I had learned. I thought about how I could frame the story, not just as a cautionary tale, but also as a personal growth narrative. The process of writing it down helped me solidify my understanding and provided a sense of finality. As I closed my journal and looked around at the serene park, I felt a profound sense of closure. The experience with Adam had been unsettling, but it had also empowered me to be more confident and aware. I was ready to move forward, carrying the lessons learned and the strength gained from overcoming the challenges. The journey had ended, but the growth and insights I had gained would stay with me. I felt a renewed sense of readiness to face whatever came next, knowing that I had the tools and wisdom to handle it with resilience and clarity.